But you, I am afraid, are maidenless.
My experience with Dark Souls and the journey to fully appreciating From Software's games took quite a while. It wasn't until Dark Souls 3 in 2016 that something finally clicked with me and I became fully engrossed in the challenging game worlds they had created. I had played FromSoft's previous games and had genuinely attempted to get into them. I made it all the way to Blighttown and Dark Souls, which infamously was considered to be the make or break point for a lot of players. I made a valiant effort to get into Dark Souls 2, but I was pretty quickly turned away by all the new ways the game handicapped the player, like decreasing the max health of each death. In 2015, I once again was drawn to having a go at their newest IP, Bloodborne. I wasn't very good at these games, but there was something about them that kept sparking my intrigue, and then when Dark Souls 3 finally rolled around a year later, I finally fell in love with the series. Interestingly, I kind of think this happened in part due to the flat I was living in at the time, since my flatmates were also playing it, and it became part of our lives over the next month as we each soldiered our way through, talking strategies and watching each other tackle boss fights. It wasn't all fun, of course, and I remember becoming incredibly close to smashing my controller during the fight against Pontiff Sullivan, but I did finish Dark Souls 3. Well, okay, I didn't beat the Nameless King, but I mean, he's the hardest boss and optional, so...
Unfortunately for you, however, you are maidenless.
Since then, I of course have gone back and properly finished all of the other games. Dark Souls 2 was actually my coping device during the first lockdown of the pandemic, and after finally beating it, I kind of think it's my favourite now next to Bloodborne. That'll probably be the most controversial thing I'll say in this whole video.
No shame in it.
There's just something about how From Software crafts their games that keeps me coming back, whereas other Souls-like games like Lords of the Fallen and Mortal Shell had me bouncing off them really quickly and hitting uninstall. So now here I am about 60 hours into Elden Ring at the time of writing, and I think I can confidently say that this is not just my favourite Souls-like game, but also one of my favourite open world games in quite some time. And why is that exactly? Let's find out, shall we?
I offer you an accord.
2022's Elden Ring sees you playing as what's known as a Tarnished, your customizable player character, who I made look like Ciri from The Witcher, as you set out across the lands between to take down the many shard bearers who possess pieces of the destroyed Elden Ring, and to help this girl Melina return to the Erdtree, which you can see looming grandiosely in the ever-reaching far distance. At least that's the gist of what I get from the story. In spite of the hype surrounding the collaboration with famed writer George R.R. Martin, the story and the lore in Elden Ring feels just as vague and mysterious as every other From Software game that it's kind of hard to feel his stamp on the game. Though I have no doubt everything will be a lot clearer in a few months once Vati Video has had time to make his excellent lore videos. Not that I really play these games for their stories anyway, though the minimalistic approach and strong sense of visual storytelling as I wander through the many remnants of a dying world with the lingering question of what happened is definitely a key part of the Souls experience. What I was most interested in this time was just how the shift to a full open world would fundamentally change the Souls experience. I had a bit of trepidation about the notion of it going open world due to my fatigue with the current state of the many Ubisoft Far Cry-like open worlds, where the map gets littered with objective markers and the worlds feel more like checklists. To be honest, outside of Red Dead Redemption 2, the last open world game that really invested me was Final Fantasy XV, where I was happily content with driving and roaming around its stunning vast world as the group bantered amusingly with one another. I had heard a few people say that the open world design had made Elden Ring a bit more accessible for new players, which made me think back to how Dark Souls 2 was also reportedly more accessible, which made a lot of fans cry in dismay, when really all that actually meant was that the game had a proper tutorial.
And God shits in my dinner once again.
Just to make it clear, this is very much still a Souls experience. It's a difficult game that demands you pay attention and tread carefully through the halls of its many castles and dungeons, learning enemy attacks lest you die and lose the precious experience points you've gathered that you need to get stronger. The bosses are some of the toughest yet and will have you getting amped as you get slightly better with each attempt before striking that final blow that sometimes will have you like... The key difference here is the sense of scale that Elden Ring's open world provides that changes both the atmosphere to a degree, but more so the actual progression through the game. See, previous Souls games were very much 3D Metroidvania games, set in a collection of interconnected levels that, while offering a few areas to explore, were actually fairly linear. Often you would be treated to nice vistas that highlighted an area in the far distance that you would have to make your way to. However, 9 times out of 10 there was usually only one route to get there. Also, that ruined city you might see from the starting point would actually just be a low polygon asset or background texture artistically implemented to save on memory, and things like elevators or tunnels would sometimes be used to load in the next area. This in turn also made the games feel quite claustrophobic at times, as you moved through area after area with the oppressive knowledge that you'll be meeting enemies every step of the way. When you first emerge into the world of Elden Ring, the first thing you see in the distance is a big fortress on a hill, with the game hinting that you need to make your way up to it, which you can do completely seamlessly. Once you get there, however, you'll more than likely be promptly smashed into oblivion by the first proper boss. Unlike previous games though, where boss fights were genuinely progression walls that you needed to smash your head against to keep playing, upon getting wrecked by Elden Ring's first boss, you can just simply turn around and go somewhere else. This somewhat rude beating is oddly the game's way of telling you to go out there and explore this world they've created, gain some experience, and come back when you're stronger. After doing some more thorough exploring of the area leading up to the castle, I found a broken old bridge that I figured would probably have a secret item waiting to reward my exploration, and instead I discovered a path that I could jump down to that led me along the sides of the cliff the castle was sitting on, right around to the other side where I was greeted with this stunning and expansive vista where I realized just how big the world really was, that I had to pause for a moment to take it all in. As I started to trek across the lands between, the sheer vastness of the places I was seeing, combined with the oftentimes lonely atmosphere, to my surprise was reminiscent of Shadow of the Colossus. That game also had a pretty massive world that relied heavily on visual storytelling. It too was a lonely world with your horse as your only companion, riding through large open plains and discovering sometimes beautiful ruins and wondering what had happened here that had led to them being abandoned. It wasn't really an experience I was expecting going into Elden Ring. I mean, there are even these things in the world that you could consider to be Colossus-like. This feeling of reminiscence for Shadow of the Colossus doesn't last for too long, however, as unlike the former, Elden Ring's world is full of things that want to kill you. Soldiers can be seen patrolling the roads, giants wait resting by cliffs, and quite a few bosses can just appear as you're minding your own business. Like this dragon dropping in on you here in this lake bed, which is frighteningly close to where you start the game.
Could the legends be true?
Legends don't burn down villages.
As I mentioned earlier, this is still very much a Souls game. Combat is intense, and mistakes can prove to be very quickly fatal. Outside of its fleeting moments of serenity, that familiar Souls feeling of being in a world that's very indifferent to you is ever present still. What sets it all apart from more recent open world games is that Elden Ring feels confident enough in its design that it's okay with you skipping things. Just because a boss dragon happened to land next to me while I was looking for crafting items did not mean I was suddenly obliged to fight it. There was even a similar dragon related experience later on in the second area of the map, where a quest item pointed to a spot on the map that I needed to go to find a key for the next big castle, and when I found it, a dragon was sleeping in front of it. To which I then snuck around behind it and got the key. This time I did fight the dragon though. Even once you get inside the more traditional claustrophobic Souls-like castle areas, there are parts you can literally hop-skip your way past thanks to the game's new jump button, meaning you can jump over railings and onto adjacent rooftops, merely gliding past the angry mobs below. This confidence in the world design and freedom the game places on the player to explore it at their own pace and as they choose is such a welcome breath of fresh air from the other games that want to guide you through a specific experience with objective markers you must follow to progress the story. A lot of the time, part of the fun in exploring the world is seeing areas in the far distance and wondering just how exactly to get there, which often made it feel more rewarding than if it had been simply marked on the map as an outpost I had to conquer to add to my overall completion percentage. In fact, I wasn't even aware that after defeating the boss in the second castle and then arriving at the grand lift I expected to take me onto the next area actually required another quest item that was in another part of the world. an area I had had the misfortune of being teleported to by an evil chest, also alarmingly close to the game's starting point. A hellish looking landscape with poisonous swamps, spectral enemies, and monstrous looking dogs. The game feels completely happy to just let you loose within its world to make your own personal adventure through it, venturing across its breathtaking landscapes, never knowing just what I might happen upon, whether it be the optional dungeons or a decrepit old fortress that I would battle my way through to gain more experience. Becoming stronger with each boss I took down felt just as engrossing as making my way through the game's actual progression-making castle areas. It honestly does make the experience of going across the world feel more like an actual journey, where I had a moment of quiet reflection about 50 hours in, as I stood atop a giant tower that overlooked the area I had previously spent hours battling through. That giant omnipresent castle that had been an incredibly daunting looking task I would have to overcome was now just a tiny speck on the horizon, which is ultimately the real takeaway I've had from my experience so far with Elden Ring. That more so than previous FromSoft games, this has felt more like a personal journey, an experience I've not had with an open world game for a long time. Sure, I guess I could talk more in depth about the actual gameplay mechanics, like how there's a crafting system now, or that the mechanic of breaking an enemy's poise has returned from Dark Souls 2, which opens them up for a critical strike. But for me, it's the confidence Elden Ring has to just let its world speak for itself, and the ways in which the player can approach it that will likely leave the most lasting impression on me. Thank you so much for listening to my thoughts on Elden Ring, and apologies for such a gap between videos. I took a bit of a break after my massive Lords of Shadow 2 project and was planning to come back with a video retrospective on the Life is Strange remaster, but because it launched in such a horrendous state, I've decided to wait until Deck 9 Games had finally patched into a stable state. So that'll be my next video, fingers crossed. Stay safe out there, my fellow Tarnished.